Hey, what is up, friend and fellow anti-netter? And hello to you too, all my Zettelkasten shitweasels of YouTube. Hello. Hey, so what I want to share with you today is the actual truth of how Nicholas Luhmann used his Zettelkasten, and also to shatter the myth about permanent notes, a term invented by Sönke Ahrens, and a man who essentially wrote a book about sort of about Zettelkasten, but most of it was interlaced with just a bunch of random stuff in his whole notions of Zettelkasten, and then invented terms like fleeting notes and literature notes and permanent notes that have actually no basis and no substance in actually how Nicholas Luhmann's Zettelkasten really worked. Now, I'm going to show you an example of this, okay? And, in my own anti-net Zettelkasten, I have like a whole section, like this actually didn't even make it into the book, like this whole section 3AE right here. I have this actually offered as a bonus. This section is called Zettelkasten Myths and Denials, and I wrote a mini ebook. I think it's like 180 pages that I give away for free when people sign up to my physical monthly newsletter in this section. And I'm going to talk about one component in this, and that is this myth, that permanent, carefully written notes myth. Okay, and I have it right here. This is really what formed the stem. This is called a card link collective. And I share, I don't know if you can see this, you can see that r.rn's page 19. And I want to show you what that actually entails. Okay, so that's the origin of the myth. So if we open How to Take Smart Notes and go to page 19, you can see that there's this section. Okay, it says, he, meaning Luhmann, usually wrote his notes with an eye towards already existing notes in the slip box. And while the notes on literature were brief, and what he's really talking about here are the bib cards, that basically that Luhmann used. He wrote them with great care, meaning like the main notes, not much different, which he didn't. Like the literature notes were so so sloppy, you can barely even read them, even if you can actually read German. He wrote them with great care, not much different from his style in the final manuscript, in full sentences and with explicit references to the literature from which he drew his material. So what he's basically saying here is that the concept of like permanent notes, which he talks about and elaborates in other parts of his book, very loosely, is he makes it seem like Luhmann wrote out like most of his book and most of his material basically in full sentences with explicit references to literature, okay? But this is not the case. What Luhmann actually did a lot of the times was he did something, and I talk about it this is my book, Anti-Net Zettelkasten, and in the chapter called Creation, okay, I talk about something called card link collectives, right, which are these types of things, and like Luhmann has them as well, and specifically something called XREF collectives, like a card that is basically a collective set of references to an external source. And so just a moment ago, I was just, kind of bored and procrastinating a little bit, and I decided to pick up Nicholas Luhmann's Theory of Society, which is basically he built his own Zettelkasten in order to, I'm going to get my chair and swing down here, in order to essentially write this book, or these two books, okay? This is the Theory of Society Volume 1, and here's Volume 2. So I opened literally a random page. I opened this page 169, and I was like, you know what? I wonder if I can actually find this in Nicholas Luhmann's Zettelkasten. So this is in chapter 5, and it's the chapter called Self-Descriptions, Neither Subject or Object. And he talks about subject, and he's a theoretical sociologist, right? He gets into just complete theory here, and he's going into theory, and he gets down over here, he's like, in keeping with consciousness theory, we can therefore also speak of the criterion-free self-identification of self-referential operation. So what I decided to do was, I'm going to adjust this camera and show you this, is I decided to navigate over, I'll zoom in here so you can see this. I navigated over to the online, essentially the online repository, the Nicholas Luhmann archive. And what I did was I went to the table of contents. There's this table of contents section up here. If you go to the online holdings and click table of contents, and then here's his Zettelkasten 2, basically his notebox 2. And what I did was I searched, basically as you can find right here, in the book is we're talking about subject and object, okay? So what I did was I searched subject, and then I found it right here. Here's like his section on subject. And then, it branches into, it like just falls into the theory of consciousness, which he talks about, right, let's see here, keeping with consciousness theory. You see that? So I'm like, okay, this is probably that section right there is probably from whence, the section from whence, he wrote this section right here. So you would like expect it to have like this entire section written out in fully formed sentences, right? According to Sönke Ahrens, right? That's what you would think, right? Of course, that is false. Once you navigate in here, and I started navigating around, I, came to basically this card right here, which is, guess what? It's an XREF collective, which I talk about on page 477 of my book in detail, how these things actually work. And so I got here and I was like, oh, okay, so this is just a collection of references, about like basically consciousness. As you can see right there, there's like the word, I'll like zoom in here so you can see, there's the word consciousness. And so then what I did is down here, you can see right here, it says, that's a footnote, right? So footnote 5, I don't know if you can see that, footnote 5. So I navigated to the back of the book to look up the actual footnote of what he's talking about. And here is what I discovered. So if we look at footnote 5, you can see it right here. He talks about, he says, C. Sidney Shoemaker, Self-Knowledge and Self-Identity, Ithaca, New York, 1963. Also see Self-Reference and Self-Awareness, the Journal of Philosophy, 65, 1968, 55, and all this. And then he writes like this whole other section, kind of just like detailing it, okay, and detailing his thoughts about this, okay? And so I like looked, as I was going through the section, I actually spotted this card and what it looked like, before it was written in, okay, into his actual work. So if you can see right here, it says Sidney Shoemaker, Self-Knowledge and as you can see right here, Sidney Shoemaker, Self-Knowledge, Self-Identity, Ithaca, New York, 1963. And then we can see it here. Sidney Shoemaker, Self-Identity or Self-Knowledge and Self-Identity, Ithaca, New York, right? You see that? 1963. And then, right here is we find Self-Reference and Self-Knowledge, Journal of Philosophy, 65, 1968, 555 to 567. And so we have there we have it right here. We also have it, basically Self-Reference and Self-Awareness, Journal of Philosophy, 65, 1968, 555. He does it too in his book. He does it till 567. I guess right here he wrote 568. So what ended up happening is as he basically was writing this section out, he then it's like basically a process in which it's not everything is fully formed and fully written out. Like he wrote this section, right? And then he said, hey, see also these sections right here, there. And then in the footnotes, within that section, on the notes to chapter 5, which we'll navigate to, he has so many footnotes, right? Then in that section, he just elaborates on it and then writes from there. So it's a very collaborative process. Not everything is written out. There's no such thing as permanent notes. Everything is perfectly written out. It was a very collaborative process where he was always focused on writing and creating. And that's, I think, one of the misnomers about Zettelkasten and PKM, this whole process, is people are using it to do everything but writing, okay? And I'm going to end here. People are using their Zettelkasten to do everything besides writing. But the most important thing, and I talk about this in my book, the Anti-Net Zettelkasten book, is, in the very beginning, you may be in this growth zone, but you need to really switch to the contribution zone, focusing on a project, having that project in mind, and writing, getting the practice of writing. Writing is the most powerful thing today, especially in the era of, AI, chatbot, and all of these worthless, lifeless writing, that you see out there. Writing is a freaking master skill. And this is something I talk about in my physical monthly newsletter. Like I give you all the details and everything about the anti-net Zettelkasten, and then um, basically then my newsletter, the Scott Shepard letter, we dive into writing and actually how to actually become a better writer and get your knowledge, get your thoughts, get everything out there, out to the world, so that you can have a huge impact on the world. So anyway, hopefully that gives you and clears up the whole like false notion that your Zettelkasten needs to be like written like what Sönke Ahrens indicates in some like fully formed sentences. No, like the whole notion of collector's fallacy does not apply to the analog world. If you do things the right way, the true way, the deliberate way, the old school way, which is the analog way, the anti-net way, and build a true Zettelkasten like this, you won't have to freaking worry about all these made-up notions and obsidian and meta tags and all that stuff. Stop freaking wasting your time. Do things the old way. Hope that gives you some insight. Peace.